There is something so special and almost mysterious about the beginning of an abstract painting. Those first initial marks, the raw energy, the story unfolding and potential of the unknown. But here's the truth. If you just randomly throw paint on the canvas without some kind of idea in mind and some kind of structure, it will almost always fall flat. In this video, I'm going to show you what I believe is the #1 most important thing to know before you start, and something that transformed my own process and what I believe is the base of the work of other successful abstract painters. But before we dive into it, hey, my name is Esther Franchuk. I'm an abstract artist, painter, traveler, creative. I make videos about my process with abstract art, tips for other artists and collectors, and so much more. So if you don't want to miss any of the future videos, make sure to subscribe and hit notification bell. I used to think abstract art is something I would never do in my own personal process, because it has this cliche around it that 5-year-old can make it, and it's just throwing paint on the canvas, and it's not sophisticated, doesn't require any skill, any education. And since I got enrolled in art college and I was taking training, more and more training, obtaining more and more skill, I started on art college, and I really wanted to reach excellence. I wanted to go higher and higher, and just my skill and everything I learned and just ability to paint representationally to show and shine in my process and in my work. So I really pushed it to the shelf of like, this is not for me, this is for unmature artists, it's for those who have no idea how to draw, how to paint, how to transfer something from real life into the canvas. And now I'm the one who is learning that and who obtaining those skills. So I just I used to look down on abstract art. I used to think it's just bad art and it's not of the greatest quality. It did change though the more education I got, because as I was going to museums, as I was like studying art market and different tendencies, and also just building my skills after all of the college and institute and all of the studies, I found a lot of abstract art being like really inspiring and really beautiful. And what I learned also is that the best abstract art is actually built on the skill, and it's built on a strong foundation, and it's not random. Like they knew, like the artists who create sophisticated abstract art, they actually, most of them, they had education, they know about composition, they know about color, they know just how to layer and how to build painting, and that's why their work looks sophisticated, because all of the years of knowledge and just having skill, no matter if it's representational or not representational, like it's gonna show through, like it's gonna show even if you are not intentional about it. So, and why it is this way? Because structure actually gives you freedom. You're not just approaching canvas and like, let's just throw paint on it and see what happens. Like this is what maybe 3-year-old will do, and there is a room for self-expression and like being intuitive and emotional in your work, even if you have the structure and education. But what structure gives you, it just really gives you understanding of how to build painting further, and also in a lot of times like how to start it successfully, how to not just have paint randomly flowing on the surface, but to create some kind of composition, create movement, make the eye of the viewer travel through the painting, also create depth, create focal point. There's like all of these rules of art that are universal, and they have to do a lot about like how we perceive art and like what is pleasing to the eye to look at and what is not. Because if you just throw paint on the canvas, it might look like it's just flat. It's not gonna have depth, it's not gonna have a sophisticated color story, it will not hold together, it will be just like, I don't know, wherever. But there's a way to do it when the structure and the knowledge that you have and that you put into the painting is almost becomes intuitive. It doesn't look like to the viewer that you are thinking too hard to make this painting, but because it's built on a solid foundation, it is good to look at, and it is sophisticated, and it tells a story without disturbing the eye and making you feel uncomfortable. So what do I mean by the structure of the painting? The structure of the painting, or backbone of a successful painting, I believe is composition. And composition is basically how you arrange elements in the space, and it's applicable to all kinds of art across the mediums. It's applicable to photography and painting and even poetry and writing. But in painting, and especially in abstract painting, it holds a lot more weight, I believe, because it's like the main point of self-expression alongside with color. For example, if you would just paint a flower or you would paint an animal and it's not, let's say, like perfectly balanced with the background and everything else, like you didn't really go with the best compositional solution of how you placed an object on your canvas, but the viewer like would still like see like, oh, it's a beautiful flower. If you put some skill, if you painted it nicely, it will still like kind of take the attention of like, this is the flower and this is the horse or something. The composition kind of becomes secondary. It still, I believe, plays like a strong role of how the painting is perceived and how successful it's going to be overall. But with abstract art, where there is no representational like clear images, basically what viewer is looking at is your ability to arrange elements in the space well and to work well with color, because they are not observing your painting like an object and focusing on the detail of it, but they looking at it more as a whole and more as a decorative piece. It will go probably in the interior, it's going to live in the living room, in the space. People are going to look at it continuously, and if something is bugging their eye, they would not necessarily want to live with it and they would not purchase it in the first place, because it's not going to be pleasing to the eye to look at it over the longer period of times, because it's not arranged well. And what is arranging elements and parts of the painting well is basically what we call composition. So sometimes you can start a painting with a particular compositional principle in mind. A lot of other times you can work more intuitively, but you will still start with a real life inspiration. For example, this painting, I started with a picture, like inspiration was a picture I took myself in Australia on our trip last year. So it was kind of like sea showing through the trees. And I used this inspiration, or the source served as an initial grid of how I work with composition. I basically took the composition from that photo and I created some mark making to help myself have a starting point for this painting. And then I work on it more intuitively. I use other inspiration, I change the color palette, but initial marks serve as a really good and strong starting point. And this is what I believe is really important about having a successful beginning and having a good abstract painting, that when you approach canvas, you are not just starting from nothing. Like no matter if you work with some kind of source imagery or you work in full intuitive, it's good to have at least some kind of idea of what you want to do. So for example, sometimes it's a particular structure, it's some kind of like principle of composition of like how you arrange elements in the space, and sometimes it's, for example, just inspiration and idea like a rose garden. Like I want this painting to feel like a rose garden, or I want this painting to feel like a cityscape, or I want this painting to feel like a summer vacation. And it's already giving you some idea for the color palette to go to, or it gives you some idea for composition. Another way would be also like starting a bit more intuitive and just making all kind of marks all over the canvas, and then trying to use those marks as a grid and pull out some image and some structure from it. But I feel like it's a little bit more advanced, and I feel like it's a little bit easier to use real life inspiration or compositional principle as a beginning point, and then if you feel like advancing a bit further and creating on top of what you already did, you can navigate through the painting and change structure and change composition along the way. But at least your beginning would not feel like fully random, because if you start random, I feel like you will also go and build on top of it, not in the best way. This painting over here, called Miraculous Piece, is actually a really good representation of using compositional principle in mind. This one is actually a combination of two different compositional principles that I use in my own process. It has overlapping of shapes and group mass. As I was starting this painting, I actually just tried to stick to having a composition from the beginning. And it's really interesting that a lot of times it changes along the way a lot more, but this one actually has the same structure that I started with, and then I built on top of it, like added shapes, experimented, slightly changed the color palette, but it actually worked to keep this like backbone, the compositional backbone, from the very beginning to the very end, which is really exciting. So now to the practical takeaways of how to start an abstract painting. First of all, you gotta work on your composition. There are so many resources about composition composition in both photography, design, painting, I found it sometimes really hard to discern of what would actually work in abstract art, because most of this compositional knowledge is actually based on painting landscapes and figures, so it's hard to see how necessarily it translates into abstract. I personally had to spend 2 years finding out like what compositional principles, how they translate into abstract art, and what is the best ways to transition all of this knowledge and create this backbone for the art in order for composition to work with abstract painting. And those are my favorite principles for composition that I use in my everyday painting process, and I teach and I show you 18 different compositional solutions in my painting course Confident Abstract that is available now. It just had launched recently. I put all of the knowledge, all of the years of experience specifically working on composition, because I cannot advocate more for using the knowledge of composition in the painting. I believe it's really what creates really successful, sophisticated painting. It's really what helps you as an artist to build a good painting from the very beginning to an end, alongside, of course, with a really good color story. In my course, Confident Abstracts, I take all these 18 compositional principles that I use in my personal process, explain them in detail, and we take 9 of them and create them together. Then we take selected compositional principles and layer color story on top to see how color story and strong composition will work together. But more than that, I take you through my complete painting journey from the beginning to the end, 3 different canvases, slightly different approach, different compositional solutions. One of those paintings I shared with you earlier before, you were able to see the beginning and the end of that painting and how the initial compositional solution played into the final piece. But in my course, I share the whole process, everything in between, no time lapses, nothing sped up, this painting and 2 more. So if you're interested in not just starting abstract strong, but also finishing them strong and everything that falls in between, and learning more about my process, make sure to click the link in the description down below. I hope this video encourages you to take your abstract beginnings more seriously. It doesn't necessarily mean that the structure gonna limit you. There's still room for spontaneous choices and intuitive painting, but it has to land and calibrate with some kind of structure in order for the final painting to work. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I make way more videos like that. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.